Hello, welcome to Orthodox Christian Television. My name is Father Christodolos. I have Vasily Biniadis with me and my friend Michael Halford. We're going to change the format of Orthodox Christian Television quite a bit. We're not going to do lectures anymore. We're going to do basically book reviews. We're going to take Orthodox Christian spirituality in print, in books, and we're going to review these books and discuss them and explore the ideas that are in the books. We decided to start this series with a book that had a profound effect on my life, and I think on Michael's life and on Vasily's life as well. The name of the book is FRANKS, Romans, Feudalism, and Doctrine, an interplay between theology and society, by Father John S. Romanides. This book, I'll show it to the camera, is the book that we're talking about today. It's a very unwieldy title, FRANKS, Romans, Feudalism, and Doctrine, an interplay between theology and society. We're going to discuss this book and explore how it had, why it had such a deep effect on our lives. I'll begin by giving quickly a brief synopsis of the thesis of the book, which is that the schism between Western Christianity and Eastern Christianity, or the Western part of the Roman Empire and the Eastern part of the Roman Empire, was not a schism really at all between a Greek East and a Latin West. It was not a schism between Roman Catholics and Greek Orthodox. It was not a schism between a mainly Greek Byzantine Empire and a mainly Latin Roman Empire in the West. There was nothing of the kind. According to Father John Romanides, and according to the historical sources, the schism really was a split between Romans in the East, what was left of the Roman Empire in the eastern part of the Roman Empire, and the Frankish conquerors, those Franks who conquered the Romans in the West. The Franks came in from their Germanic homelands, the Franks being a Germanic Teutonic tribe of illiterate barbarians. They came in from their German homeland and conquered the sophisticated civilization of the Romans in the West. And when they did this, they set up the false historical lie that the empire in the East was now Greek and therefore heretical, and that the empire in the West was the Holy Roman Empire, or was what was left of the Roman Empire. So I'll open up the conversation now to the three of us, but basically the Frankish West and a Roman East is what Father John Romanides is explaining in this book, not a Latin West and a Greek East. So did I explain the thesis too simply, or do you want to pick it up from anywhere? I mean, when I first heard this, this blew me away. When I first read this book, I never heard anything like this. And growing up in America and going to high school and junior high, you know, we learned about the Greeks and the Romans, and we always thought that the Greeks and the Romans were two different things. And now I understand that to be a Greek is to be a Roman, and to be a Roman is to be a Greek. And any part of the Roman Empire that you were in, whether you were a Celt or a Hispanic or an African, you were a Roman and you were Orthodox, and you had a Greek culture that you were surrounded by within a Roman political system. Similar to like you're a English American, Anglo-Saxon American, I'm a Greek American, or we're Greek Americans, they're Italian Americans. You had Greek Romans, Latin Romans, African Romans, Celtic Romans. And this is what Father John is talking about, and it was this propaganda ploy that Charlemagne and the Franks started in order to divide and conquer the Roman Empire.
And a big part of that also is, other than the propaganda and the educational, methodology being used to propagate that whole belief, also there's another aspect to it, is that basically we sometimes assume inherently that things have always been in the past the same way they are today. And today you have a Latin Western Christianity and a so-called Greek Eastern Christianity, and you kind of just assume that that's the way it was. And that's what's also taught in the educational system. And, also, you summed it up perfectly. That was basically the major shock factor initially with reading this book, and what Father John says as far as the oneness of the Roman Empire and its belief system as well, and its faith.
Well, what do you think of that when he says that the Romans were really Greeks and that the Greeks were really Romans? I mean, what does that mean? What is that all about? I mean, I always thought that the Romans were Romans and the Greeks were Greeks.
Well, it's hard to swallow at first, yeah,
Romans
because
spoke
that's how
Latin,
you.
Greeks
Right.
spoke Greek.
Yeah, but unfortunately, for those that propagate this myth of the Latin East and the Latin West and the Greek East, the record of history shows that the Greek was spoken all throughout the empire, that most of the people were bilingual or trilingual, they spoke several languages, and that Greek was the lingua franca, the language of culture for most of the
Roman population.
which surprised me, because if you think about it, Paul the Apostle's writing an epistle to the Romans. If the Romans were a Latin-speaking people, as the Frankish historians claim, why didn't he choose to write his epistle in Greek, not Latin?
That's a good question.
Absolutely.
His letter to the Romans is written in Greek. All his letters are written in Greek, even to the Galatians. So the Galatians were Romanized Celtic people living not in Ireland, but in today's Turkey.
So you would presume that
yeah, if he was writing specifically to the Romans, you think he'd specifically write in Latin. So clearly the evidence shows that to be Latin was not necessarily to be a Roman. And to be a Roman, he explains in another paper of his, but he does talk about it in this book too, that there was never an identity of Romans with Latin. Latin and Roman was not really the same thing. In fact, he explains that Romans actually fought the Latins at one point. So really then, why did the Roman Empire not call itself a Greek Empire? I mean, what I'm trying to get at here is, what I'm trying to remember is my first confusion when I first read this book, the first confusion that set in the first time I read it, because that's really what happened to me. When I first read this book, it was about 10 years ago, and it really...
Well, the Greeks primarily were identified as the pagans, those that worshiped the pagans. When paganism was defeated by...
Well, let's go back to when they were both, when everyone was a pagan. Let's start with the Roman Empire when it was pagan. So you couldn't say that to call somebody a Greek was to call them a pagan rather than a Christian. Let's go before the church started. Let's go to pagan times. Well, was there a Roman people and was there a Greek people that were not?
Maybe prior to Rome conquering the Greek Empire.
Okay. So
but when Rome conquered the Greek Empire, it became Greek.
It essentially was Hellenized.
Yes.
Greekized, for those who...
So which is something about that you don't, when you study history, they don't tell you this.
Right. And also the term you just used, although probably understood a lot more clearly by most of the viewers, is also inaccurate. You know, Hellenized versus Greekized.
Well, I use the word Greekized because some people don't
it's understood.
Hellenized.
Right,
Hellenized. Being Hellenic is being Greek. So let's keep the terminology clear.
And another reason also, I think, the shock factor, you know, you're trying to understand why you were shocked initially. I don't know about yourself personally, but also as a young Greek American, when I first learned this, and I basically traced the root of my shock. Basically, there's a big gap many times in the historical timeline. You basically have ancient Greece, and then you have post-1821 Greece, and what it is to be a Greek as far as nationality is concerned. And you miss that whole interim, which is the Roman period, the Hellenized Roman period.